Hey guys, it's Tamara. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about borderline personality disorder and relationships. It's been a while since I talked about this topic. It's also been a while since I brought up borderline personality disorder, but we're going to do something just a little bit different in this video. Last week we talked about sociopaths and psychopathic mothers. We also talked about pathological liars the week before that. So what we're going to do in this video is I kind of want to contrast borderline personality disorder with a psychopathic mother or psychopathic tendencies. Somebody also had asked the question if I'm going to talk about male psychopaths, and that is coming up, so stick around for that. So thank you so much for coming back to my channel. For those who are subscribed, thank you so much. And for those who are new to the channel, I encourage you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button on the side so you can stick around with us, suggest topics, and be a part of our growing community, all right? The benefits for you in today's video is that we're going to kind of contrast. I'm not going to make it obvious, but we're going to contrast borderline personality disorder with psychopathy. Okay, that sounded a little weird to me, but yeah, we're going to contrast borderline personality disorder with psychopathic tendencies, all right? So let me just start out by pointing out some of the common traits and behaviors and characteristics of an individual who has borderline personality disorder. Okay, so trait number one, okay, in an individual who has been diagnosed or undiagnosed with borderline personality disorder, trait number one is typically impulsivity. Impulsivity, as you know, is an inability to think before you act, right? You just act on emotion, you act on gumption, you act on intuition, or you act on some feeling that you have without really processing it first. That can be very reckless. It can be self-injurious in a sense. And it can also disrupt relationships. One of the things I've noticed in my 12-year career working with individuals who have BPD, primarily adolescents, is that the impulsivity really does take over. It really takes over. The impulsivity gets in the way of processing the danger of things. It gets in the way of processing the foundation of relationships and the foundation of what people actually mean. It gets in the way of processing one's emotions and thought patterns, which causes those big blow-ups and explosions. It also leads to anger management difficulties because you're just reacting on an emotion and you're not really processing what's being said or what's being done to you. So impulsivity is a huge factor in borderline personality disorder. Okay, so the next one is riskiness and self-harm. That's another pretty common personality trait. Under the heading of BPD in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that recklessness and that self-injurious behavior, it's usually a part of the diagnostic criteria for you to receive the diagnosis of BPD. Riskiness could be gambling, it could be drinking and driving, it could be having multiple sexual rendezvous with guys or women, it could be spending without, checking how much you're spending. So going on a shopping spree with a bunch of credit cards. Recklessness can also include forging signatures and stealing. So these are all the risky behaviors. Now let's go to self-injurious behaviors. That could be cutting, it could be burning, it could be banging one's head up against a wall. It could be driving way over the speed limit. Self-harm can also take the form of putting yourself in a dangerous situation so as to get raped or molested or anything like that. So risky behaviors and self-injurious behaviors or self-harm is also another important part of the diagnostic criteria for BPD. All right, the next one is disproportional anger. So your anger is disproportionate to the trigger. You just blow up and you become extraordinarily upset and you're not exactly sure why that happens. Individuals with BPD when they become upset, they fly off the handle. Not everybody, but most do. Fly off the handle. They don't know how to control their emotions. They don't know how to process things. They're very impulsive and sometimes very reckless. And so with impulsivity and recklessness together, you're going to get disproportional anger, or anger that's disproportionate to the trigger. All right. The next would be chronic suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts and dysphoria. Most individuals with borderline personality disorder struggle with dysphoria. They're often in a state of depression. Their mood is often low, irritable, and reactive. But there's also that chronic suicidal ideation where it's those passive death wishes of, I wonder what life would be like if I weren't here. I wonder if people would miss me if I weren't here. Or I wonder if I would feel a whole lot better if I just killed myself, right? Those are passive death wishes. But we also have chronic suicide attempts with individuals who have borderline personality disorder. Okay, and they're attempting, whether that's cutting one's wrist, whether that's overdosing, whatever the case may be, there are chronic suicidal attempts or chronic suicidal thoughts as the diagnostic criteria of BPD, all right? And last but not least, as far as the diagnostic criteria, emotional chaos and mood lability. And that's really being emotional and chaotic and not being able to calm oneself, not being able to process emotions, not being able to talk through emotions and handle them and kind of sit in the emotion without reacting. So that emotional chaos really takes people under who have BPD. It's so overpowering, right? One of my clients that I used to see who had BPD once said to me, it feels like someone's pulling a garbage bag over me. It's like a garbage bag of emotions and it's just all over me and I can't process, I can't think, I can't react appropriately. I'm just submerged in emotion. And that's the best way to describe it. So I want to point out some additional features of borderline personality disorder, which a lot of people don't know about, but there are other traits and personalities that I have witnessed and that research has focused on, but you don't typically find this when you Google it. And I'm not quite sure why, but let me point those out right now. All right. So one characteristic that's in addition to the criteria we just talked about is being personable, right? Personable. There are individuals with borderline personality disorder who are extraordinarily personable. They're kind, they're loving, they're emotional, they're warm. And I think that's what pulls in a lot of people, right? That's what pulls people into them. That's how come they get good relationships. That's how come they get friendships. That's how come, they can hold on to relationships long after they've abused the relationship. It's because they're personable, they're warm, right? They're emotional. There's a good side to BPD. Borderline personality disorder isn't just all negative, right? There's some good parts to that person, and that same emotional sensitivity that causes them to fly off the handle and be impulsive and reckless is the same emotional sensitivity that happens when they're in a good mood. And so that can be very charming and very complementary to a relationship. The next thing is splitting. Okay, there's not a lot of information on this, but splitting is seeing the person as a savior one moment and then seeing the person as the devil the next minute, right? You're kind of splitting their character, splitting their personality. You're not sticking with one view of them, you're splitting. Okay, so that's another thing we rarely hear of. The next thing is imposter syndrome. There are some people with borderline personality disorder that do not feel skilled. They don't feel successful. And so because of that, they end up second guessing themselves and questioning if they really are as skilled as maybe they are. It puts the individual in two positions. Okay, one position is I'm overly emotional and sometimes I feel like I'm acting. Sometimes I feel histrionic. And then there are individuals who feel like, okay, I may be skilled in certain things, but I'm not skilled here. So you can look at that in two ways. Okay. The next one is insecurity and immaturity. That's something that we don't see a lot of when we Google what is borderline personality disorder, but there's a lot of insecurity, and that's what often leads to the chronic suicidal thoughts. That's what also leads to the poor attachment in romantic relationships. There may have also been poor attachment as a child, having poor attachment with a dad, or a poor attachment with a caretaker or a mother. And so that can come back to haunt the individual with BPD in their adult relationships. So we'll talk more about attachment as we go along. I'll try to put a video up here for you if I touched on this in a different video. Okay. And then last but not least is dependability. Some individuals with BPD are just not dependable. You can't depend on them to be strong in every situation. Neither can you depend on them to keep their promises, because a lot of times their emotions are like up and down, up and down. So anything could happen when they're going to just say, okay, I have to step out of this. I can't handle this. It's too much for me. So it can be really difficult for them to be dependable. So these are added traits and symptoms and personality characteristics that aren't typically found when you Google borderline personality disorder. I'm going to try to put some articles in the description box below so that you can see those as well. Thank you so much for being with me today. I encourage you to hit the thumbs up button if this video was helpful to you. But I will see you in the next video. I'll see you then. Bye.